Hi, it's James from J Butcher Carpentry. I've been asked a few questions about the Dewalt 54 volt flex volt saws. I've obviously got the regular I call it a right hand drive saw, and then you've got the worm drive style, again 54 volt, but this is one from the States that somebody imported and then decided they didn't like it. So I had their arm off and bought it from them before they released it in the UK. And then obviously we've got the HKC55 cordless. I only, just as a comparison, don't really know why, but this saw gets a bit slated because I think people expected a lot more from it. But at the end of the day, it's only an 18 volt saw, so it's never going to be anywhere near power wise as good as these two. I think the other reason why I feel that gets overlooked a lot and why a lot of people feel it's underpowered, I think, is because Festool have kept with the same girth blade, whereas the Dewalt went down a very thin girth blade. Now, it was great, the blade being thin, because it allows less resistance on the blade because it's not cutting through so much material, but you can see that's the downside to having a really thin blade. Now, I know obviously the diameter of that blade is a lot smaller, but there ain't nowhere near the same amount of flex in one of the Festool blades, or a blade that's a bit thicker girth than what you'd get on the Dewalt ones. And obviously I've got the one from out of the right hand drive, and again that's got just as much flex in it. And to give you some comparison to the size, so I've got this is from a TS75, and you can see there's nowhere near the amount of flex that you get in one of the Dewalt blades. So before everybody jumps at me and says, you can get other blades for it. Yes, you can get thicker blades for these saws. But again, then you're reducing the amount of runtime that you're going to get out of one of these saws. So let's get onto the power. Honestly, unless you've used one of these saws, you won't realise how much power you get out of one of these batteries. They are immense. When I say immense, when I tell people that I can cut and pitch timber roof with one of these saws, they're like, no, you're having a laugh. That's what I use, one of these. This one has been adapted. So because the HK55C was getting such abuse, as far from people saying, it's just not powerful enough, what is the point of it? But I wanted a saw that I could use with the FSC rail. I'll probably say the FSK rail. So I wanted a saw that I could use with that rail. I've got the HK85, brilliant saw, but it's corded. I wanted a cordless saw that I could use with this rail. So I made my little adapter plate. It's not the greatest, but it works. So that works on there. Now, again, everyone's going to jump at me and say, but you can't use it when it's beveled. No, you're right, you can't use it when it bevels over because of the way that this saw works. When you bevel it over, it moves the blade into where the rail would be. So it's no good on a 45-degree angle. And yes, you can get another model with the guide rail plate on it. So it works with the Dewalt guide rail. Again, has exactly the same issue though. So that saw's got 2 notches in it. For if it's compounded over 45, then you have to move the saw over. So it compensates for that movement in the blade. Obviously with the excuse me, Corona. So obviously with the Festool one, when you compound it over, it doesn't do that. It kind of moves. It doesn't have that same issue, which is a bit of a shame that you can't then use it on there. But this thing, the worm drive, that is a monster of a saw. And it's no joke when I say that this is actually more powerful than a corded saw, 240, hands down more powerful. That thing is a weapon. 9 amp hour battery. Now 9 amp hour in an 18 volt. You've got to get your head around that. It's not a 9 amp hour 54 volt battery. It's not. It's 9 amp hour in an 18 volt format. So what's that? 3 amp, sorry, in 54. So it's not got the same power output. The weight of this thing, that's the other issue that you're going to have with it. It's a very heavy saw when you're just wielding it about. It's not something that you could just pick up and easily use. Huge amount of power though. But also the way it delivers that power, you'll notice I've got the blade, an old blade, it's a bit ruined, but the arbor, it's not round, it's a diamond shape. Now that is to do with the amount of torque that this motor in here puts out. Huge amount of torque. You can't put a regular round arbored blade in it. I've tried. All it wants to do is just spin the blade. Spin the motor. It doesn't want to spin the blade at all. That's how much torque that thing's got. It's ridiculous. Good thing about it, little hook for the joist in, so you can hook it over joists, which is quite handy, I suppose. I think the compound on it is like 53 degrees or something, so it does compound over quite a long way, which is another good thing. Now, I'm glad I've done that, because it just showed you one of the other weaknesses with some of these saws that you get. This safety bit here is a bit gappy. When you compound that saw over, you can see how much blade is showing on that. Now, I've got a Makita saw, that's the magnesium Makita saw. That's worse. That's a big blade on that thing. And for that amount of teeth to be showing, all right, on one of these, I'll show you. They stop well quick, but on a regular like 110 saw where you've got that much blade showing, I'm not sure. There's been a few times when I've been nearly caught out like it. So that would be one thing I would say. We'll just check on the other one. It's nowhere near, and that's with my adapter plate hitting. If you can you see that in there? So my adapter plate's hitting the guard before it would naturally hit, so it probably would be a lot closer to the in a normal guise. It would be a lot easier, a lot less blade showing. So that would be one thing. The amount of blade that you've got showing on that saw when it's in a 90 degree is quite a lot. So yeah, there's one issue. The dust, sorry. So the dust port on this, for some weird reason, it's got this here. Again, I'm not 100% sure why that is, because you seem to end up with more, even with an extractor on it, you still get dust coming out of there. I'm sure someone's going to let me know why, but that to me is not the greatest idea. The one on the worm drive, that doesn't actually, I haven't got one for it, but I know that you can get a dust port for it. Again, brings me on to the next thing. With this saw, you are going to have to be prepared to be emptying your boots of sawdust every 5 minutes, because your feet are going to get covered. You do get absolutely, especially if you're left-handed, you're not going to be worried about it because the saw's going to be away from you. But when you're right-handed like I am, it's covering you. So be prepared for that. But I think there's a few things with this saw. I use both of them in conjunction with each other, if that makes sense. So if I'm cutting a roof and I'm doing a hip and I'm cutting all my jack rafters, I'll have one set up for one angle, and then I have the other one set up for the other angle, so I can then cut both pairs. I think it's just because I'm lazy and I've got 2 saws that I do that, but it just seems for me a lot easier. I'm working from one side each time. Just one of my tips. Gang cutting of gang cut rafters with these works a treat. Really good. It is a good saw. Just, I think with that one it is a lot more first fix. I don't think you could get away with it so much for everyday use. This one you can get away with it a lot more. It's a lot more usable, I think, in my opinion. I've had this saw. I've had both of them for about 2 years now, and I would say the regular drive one is a lot more usable. But that is just such a weapon. That thing is without doubt the most powerful cordless saw you can buy to date. Don't think there's anything that touches it, and I don't think a lot of powered saws would touch this, especially not with a 9 amp hour battery. But again, it is the weight that is a big issue. I'm not I've got my bathroom scales here. I'm not sure if this is going to work, so we'll give it a go anyway. And it may, like again, this ain't going to be accurate, but so that is saying that's 7.2 kilo, and that's with the 9 amp hour battery in it. Now that battery, to give you some idea of how much that weighs, is that going to work? It doesn't weigh anything. That's how light that battery is. So I'm just saying that you've got to be prepared that worm drive style saw is heavy compared to those two. That's probably that saw on its own is probably as heavy as those two together. But then coming back to the little HK 55, again, nowhere near the power output that the other two have got, but it is a competent little saw. And again, we touched on it briefly about the blades. Blades in skill saws make a massive difference. It's just there's no getting away from it. If you're saying that your saw's struggling to get through a piece of material, have a look at the blade to start with. Now this hasn't got a panther blade, but it's got close to it. So this has got 18 teeth. Now I've been using this to cut down half-hour rated fire doors, and yeah, it's not going to whip through it, but it does cut it. It doesn't seem to struggle too badly. And for a lightweight 18-volt saw, it's great. I was really impressed with it. The fact that you can also then put it on that, and you've got accurate angle cuts. I don't think you can really, I wouldn't say it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but for me, I've got to say, it's a really good little saw. And I think if you put a decent ampage battery in it, like a 5.2 amp hour battery, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. I wouldn't say you'll be converted, but it is a very good little saw. But coming back to the Dewalt stuff, people have asked me which would I prefer, which would I recommend. It's horses for courses. It really does depend on what you're doing. It's like saying which is your favourite child. You can't pick. It really does depend on what you're doing. But if I was really pushed, I would probably just still say that than regular drive one, just simply because it's a little lighter. If you're using it all day long, you're not going to like that at all, unless you're a flipping unit. But again, you can't get away from the fact that saw has got so much power. But what I also will say is that these blades, because they're so thin, they have a tendency to wander if you're cutting long rips of stuff. They want to move about. They're not, you can see that, and I'm not really putting a huge amount. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on that saw blade, but it is moving a lot. That could be an issue. I know you can get thicker, slightly thicker blades, so yeah. But that's what I think. You may have other ideas on it, but that's, after 2 years of use, that's what I've come to the conclusion, if there was a conclusion after all of that. But anyway, let me know what you think. Really appreciate you having a watch of it. Take care, guys. See you soon.